Happy Venus Day, Collective. So I decided today I'm just going to not really try to do too much on this Friday the 13th and the day before the solar eclipse new moon in Libra. Now, you may or may not be a follower of the planetary movements, but I definitely am. So if you felt a little bit of energy that you couldn't quite put your finger on why it felt a little heavier, aside, world events being obvious, although just another part also of the things subject to the collective energies. You know, even if you don't turn on the news, my guess is that you felt something that almost, I guess if I have to liken it to at least how it's felt in the context of my life, it feels a lot like an urgency, but it's like a hurry up and wait type feeling. I don't know if that makes sense, but if that resonates with you, if that's kind of hitting home, leave me a comment and let me know. I'm actually really curious. I ask my friends that I talk to regularly on text, you know, how's this week treating you? I asked my neighbor, she passed by the other day, she's a therapist, and we talk regularly, exchange food, and you know, I just asked her, how are your clients doing this week? And she said actually that a very common theme that she was encountering was grief. And I just thought that, you know, that definitely is relatable. You know, because we can grieve all kinds of things. Most obviously, you know we grieve people that pass on. We grieve pets that pass on. We grieve death. That's, you know, that occurs across the world. You grieve all kinds of things. But, you know, this kind of feels a little bit collective in the sense that whatever it is you've had to grieve in your life, especially this year, sometimes it's just a past version of yourself. Sometimes it's a dream. Sometimes it's a plan that you realize isn't going to go quite as you had hoped. And sometimes, you know, grief is misplaced in that context. Sometimes it's like going back to the drawing board. But still in all, sometimes it actually is grief. You do have to grieve something that you had to say goodbye to often. And, you know, that got me to thinking. I was talking with a friend who came to visit me this weekend. And we got to talking about, you know, she's no stranger to grief, nor am I, of multiple kinds, but specifically the loss of life, losing somebody dear to you through passing. And we were talking about the kind of grief that you have when somebody passes, and it's the kind of grief I think you get the most sort of shows of sympathy, expressions of sympathy and well wishes for, because even if somebody hasn't experienced the loss of somebody they love, they can easily relate to what that might feel like. You know, they might not be able to empathize, but they do their best and they think, wow, I don't know what I would do if that were me. And of course we appreciate those shows of compassion, but there's a different kind of grief that we were talking about and how it feels just as profound. And I don't mean to make light or, I don't know, I don't like to compare things that are equally as devastating to the person left behind, but it's a different category of grief where you mourn somebody who is still alive that the circumstances kind of require for you to treat as a death. And that's not to wish ill will on that person. It's just, you know, in your own life, you might understand that sometimes, even just close friends, you know, sometimes you drift apart, and sometimes you realize that this person is at a different stage in their life than I am. Sometimes, you know, something that bonded you and somebody else, I think this probably happens all with childhood friends, is still there, you know, the nostalgia and the memories, but sometimes, you know, they start making choices that might not resonate with you. And it's not so much that you're judgmental of those choices, it's just that you have been forced to actually confront the fact that those choices and the path that they're on are at odds with you being true to yourself, at odds with the person that you have now found yourself, or that you are becoming, or that you have become. And, you know, kind of one minute you turn around and you're catching up with this person and you realize the thing that bonded you to, sometimes it's a toxic trait, or sometimes it's just a behavior that you've left behind, whatever. You can make these sort of assessments without value judgments in a lot of cases, which makes it very hard because it's asking you to choose yourself in those cases. But in choosing yourself, in choosing your new self, have you ever found that that requires you to also grieve an old version of yourself? And this is what I mean about grieving the living. So when someone is no longer in your life and you know that they're alive, living their life, you have to also grieve a second death, and that is the death of who you were with that person. And even if it's a less desirable version of you, even if it was a version of you that, you know, if given the choice now to reroute and pick back up on that track, or to keep going forward, which, you know, often is a choice, you would still choose your current path. But sometimes, you know, you were perfectly happy with who you were in the past, but the circumstances require you to nonetheless grieve that version of yourself that has died, more or less. And that can be a very hard form of grief. Now, I know from personal experience, when my grandfather died, it was a grief that I had never known, you know, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Took me a couple years to actually recalibrate, but in that I kind of had to have my journey into the underworld, so to speak, and really explore what that loss meant for me and what it meant for the family dynamic, you know, as the head of the family. And, you know, leaving behind my grandmother and my mom and my aunt and my two cousins, you know, sometimes it becomes obvious at that point what him as the head of the family really was. And so for me at that stage in my life, it was very profound. But I carry that with me. You know, one thing about somebody who is grieved is there becomes a newer appreciation for life that, you know, I don't think I had before that. So it's like this really beautiful tapestry that, you know, the flaws, what look like flaws, and that's really just like an emotional event that causes despair, you know, and so in the immediate after effect, you see this certain harmony in the weave, and then, you know, this tragedy occurs, and it's almost like the machine got jammed. But then over time, as the machine keeps weaving and the colors become kind of overlapped and the weaves become more intricate and complex, you realize that that jam in the machine has created something unique and beautiful that, you know, you don't try to cover up. It just becomes part of the weave. It becomes one of the, I think, most attractive parts of the tapestry. And so I guess I just would encourage any of you who might be feeling that collective sense of grief to consider what is being woven into your tapestry maybe this week, that because you're still, you know, front and center watching the machine, you know, maybe sputter along and jam and then, you know, keep going. Just think of what that might look like stepping back after time has passed, and, you know, imagine how at the time when you were watching this go down and you were feeling it and you thought, oh wow, this is a mistake, this is not right. But fast forward a couple years from now, maybe even a year, and just try to imagine that version of yourself. Imagine what you're putting in now so that that version of yourself can have the beautiful, complex, one-of-a-kind pattern that only you can have, and what richness that will add to your life in ways that you don't even see. So if this resonates again, if you have a story where this really describes a point in your life, personal struggle, maybe it was, you know, you went to school and it wasn't what you thought, or you had a job, it wasn't what you thought, and you left and you thought, am I on the right track? You know, my tapestry feels all messed up. Everyone's asking what's up with that, and you don't know, but you feel deeply that you are on the right path. And then it's not until years later to where you look back and go, wow, you know, I wish I'd had more confidence in myself. I wish I had stood in that inner authority that I know is there, that I knew was there then, but now I really know was there and was at the wheel. Let me know. I would really like to hear your stories. But until then, I do hope you have a beautiful remainder of your Venus day, and happy Friday the 13th.